Okay, so let's see again. It already says a few psukim earlier. Why does he say again Veyadata? If you already know, you know. It's like I tell you, you should know, or you know, or you were shown something to know, and then a few moments later, and you should know. Gam ma'u hayoim. Over here he adds the word hayoim. First time he just says atarei saladas ki Hashem hu elokim ein ed milvado. The second time he says Veyadata, you should know hayoim today. What does he mean by today? What's the diuk today? Achine acher matan Torah shiro ponim al ponim v'shamu ba'atzmam aseres hadibros. After matan Torah, the giving of the Torah, when they saw the divine, they saw Hashem face to face. And what happens is they heard themselves aseres hadibros. Amru, they said, Im yoisvem anachnu l'shmaya. If we're going to hear more Goimer, we're not going to be able to survive. And therefore they told Moshe Rabbeinu, Krav Ata, you should go close, Ushama, and you should hear all the things that Hashem says, and you'll give it over to us. Later in Parshas Vaschana, Moshe Rabbeinu tells the story. After Atar Reis, after Veyadata, he goes through the Aseres HaDibros again. He tells them the story of Matan Torah. Hashem spoke to you face to face. And he goes through the Ten Commandments. And Moshe Rabbeinu tells the story that when you heard the voice coming from the darkness and the mountain was on fire, what happened is you came over to me and you said, we're not going to be able to live. If we continue to hear the voice of Hashem, Kol Hashem Elokeinu, v'masna, we're going to perish. We will cease to exist. And therefore they said, Krav Ata Ushama, you go close and you hear everything that Hashem says and you'll give it over to us and we will listen to you and we will do it. That's what the Jewish people asked Moshe after Matan Torah. V'HaKadosh Baruch Hu hiskim al yadam. And Hashem agreed. Moshe Rabbeinu says, Hashem agreed. V'amar, and he told Moshe Rabbeinu, Heitivu kol asher diberu. What they said is good, what they said is right. And therefore, Leichem mar lehem, go tell them, Shuvu lechem la yalechem, you go back to your tents. V'ata, you Moshe Rabbeinu poi, stay here, Amaydi Madi, remain with me, and I will share with you all of the mitzvahs and all of the laws, and you'll give it over to the Jewish people. That's what happened. So Moshe Rabbeinu tells this story right after he shares the story of Matan Torah, that you told me you listen to everything. Hashem agreed. He said, Eitivu, they're saying the right thing. You stay here, and I'll tell you everything, you'll give over all the mitzvahs. And then Moshe finishes and he says, and make sure to observe and do everything you have been told, the entire path that Hashem gave you, and that way you'll have long life in the land that you're going to inherit. Right after that, this is Perek Hey of Eschanam. Right after that starts Perek Vav, and he starts off, Uksiv, right after that he says, Zois mitzvah chukav v'mishpatim, asher tzivah Hashem Elokeichem l'lamed aschem lasses ba'aretz asher tevim Hashem l'nishta. And this is the mitzvah, these are the laws that Hashem said to teach you to do in the land that you're going to inherit, Eretz Yisrael. And he continues and he says, in order that you should fear Hashem and do all of His mitzvahs, you and your son and your grandson, all the days of your life, you should have long life and you should listen and do it all, and you will increase. Ad eretz zavas chalav udvash, until he finishes this and says, like Hashem told you to do in the land that flows with milk and honey. And right after that is, uksiv basrei, right after that is, this is Perek Vav Pasuk Dalet, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, shehi ha-mitzvah rishona shenistav achna aseres hadibros miphi Moshe. This is the first mitzvah that they received right after the Aseres HaDibros, the Ten Commandments from Moshe. Till this point, Moshe is discussing. The Jews say, we don't want to hear more, you go over. Hashem agrees, and he tells this to Moshe, that I'll tell you all the mitzvahs, and Moshe says, now make sure you do it. And what's the first mitzvah? He says, Shema Yisrael, listen, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad v'ahavta. V'tzarech lahav, and here we have to understand, Lama higdim loyma v'zois ha-mitzvah. Lasses ba'aretz, the parsha Shema, chayves ha-gufi, v'nei eges, bein ba'aretz chula. Before he gives the first mitzvah, he says, this is the mitzvah you should do in the land. It sounds like he's going to give a mitzvah that's going to be applicable to Eretz Yisrael. L'poil, what's the mitzvah that he gives over? Parshas Shema. But Shema is a chayvus haguf. The parsha of Shema the Emunah in Hashem, the Ava of Hashem, these are all an obligation. In Halacha, there's what's called Chayvus Haguf and Chayvus Haaretz. Chayvus Haguf are obligations on the body of the Jew, on the being of the Jew. That applies in Eretz Yisrael and Chutz La'aretz. For example, the mitzvah of tefillin. It's not only in Eretz Yisrael, it's everywhere. The mitzvah of tzitzis, all these types of mitzvahs are called Chayvus Haguf. Right? Mitzvah of Shabbos. Wherever a Jew is a mitzvah of Shabbos. Then there's called Chayvus Haaretz. The obligation that has to do with Eretz Yisrael, with the land. It's the holiness of the land. For example, the mitzvah of Truma, the mitzvah of Meiser, the mitzvah of Shemitah. These are not a mitzvah on the Jewish body. A Jew living in America, Australia, it has to do with Chayvus Haaretz, because it's the land, it's the soil, the holiness, Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. That's called Chayvus Haaretz. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and the mitzvahs that say they're all Chayvus Haguf. V'aftas Hashem Elokecha, you should love God, the words should be on your heart, the mitzvah of Limudat Torah, the mitzvah of educating your children, the mitzvah of Tefillin, the mitzvah of Mezuzah. These are all Chayvus Haguf. But what does he say before? V'zoysa mitzvah shetasa lasas ba'aretz. And then the first mitzvah is Shema Yisrael. So those are the questions here in the Maimer. So again, just to summarize the few questions, Moshe Rabbeinu says, "Veyadata yoyim v'shavaysa levavecha, ki Hashem hu alekim b'shamayim imav v'la'aretz metochas ein noid." Very powerful pasuk, but that's Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 39. Sefer Dvarim Perek Daled pasuk Lamed Tes, Parshas Vaschana. But just a few verses earlier, verse 35, pasuk Lamed Hey, he said, "Mamish." The identical theme, Ata harei saladas ki Hashem hu alekim ein noid milvado. There's a few slight changes, but the theme is the same. Why repeat it? And a few verses later. And the first time you already said, you have shown it to them so that they know, and then you tell them, you should know it. They already know it. You already told them that they know it. And the second time he says, Hayoim, today. The first time he doesn't say today. And what does he even mean? You should know today. You should also know tomorrow, not only today. It doesn't seem like limited today. The first time he doesn't say, Ata harei saladas hayoim. Ata harei saladas always. Here he says, V'yadaita hayoim b'shavayis alavavach. In order to explain this, he discusses another question, and that is in the continuation of the parsha, when Moshe repeats the whole story of Matan Torah, and that the Jewish people didn't want to hear more, and they sent him to hear, and Hashem agreed. He said, I'm going to give you all the mitzvahs, and then he says, and now let me tell you the mitzvah you should observe in the land. What's the first mitzvah? He says, a mitzvah that's applicable everywhere, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad v'ahavta, Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha, etc., which is the first mitzvah he gave to the Jewish people after Matan Torah and Parshas Vaschana. The first mitzvah that he told them in Parshas Vaschana after he shared the story of Matan Torah. To understand all of this, tzarich lahagdim biyur inyan das ve'inyan amuna shem shtei mitzvahs. So for this, we need a more profound explanation of two themes, two separate mitzvahs. One is das and one is amuna. The language here is Veyadata hayam. The Veyadata comes from the word das. You should know. That's one mitzvah. There's another mitzvah, Emunah. We translate Emunah usually as faith. Gläuben in Yiddish, belief. Right? Emun, trust, belief. It's two separate mitzvahs. There's the mitzvah of das, the mitzvah of Emunah. The mitzvah of Emunah is a mitzvah to believe. The mitzvah of das is a mitzvah to know. It says, Kihine ksiv das alekei avecha b'divrei hayamim alev chav chestas. This is the words of David HaMelech to Shlomo before he passes away. It's recorded in Divrei Hayamim. It's Chronicles 1, chapter 29, verse 9. Chapter 28, verse 9. So David HaMelech tells to Moshe, Da es alekei avecha. You should know the God of your father. Here again, the word is da, from the word das. Das alakei avicha, and he continues v'avdeyu b'leiv of shalom, and serve him with a complete heart. The ritzaynei leimar p'chin is das v'asaga mamash. When David HaMelech uses these words das, it seems like what he wants to say is the ritzaynei leimar, that he's talking about das, real knowledge, which is hasaga. Hasaga is you get it, you understand it, you attain it, you comprehend it. Mamash. Al derech ze pirish b'shalah, perek basara b'perek basara mamonas maimed aleph. This is how the Shalah also understands it. The das alekevich is a mitzvah on das. Uksiv, we have another pasuk. This is in Parshas B'Shalach, after the story of Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the sea. Over there the expression is Vayaminu ba'Hashem u'b'Moshe. It says that God saved the Jewish people then from the hands of the Egyptians. They saw the Egyptians dead at the bank of the sea, al Sfas Hayam. They saw the great hand of what Hashem performed against the Egyptians. And what does it say? Vayiru amas Hashem, vayaminu, we say it every morning, vayaminu ba'avaya, they believed in Hashem. Over here the word is Emunah. Vayaminu, the word Emunah. Va'inyan, what's the difference between Emunah and what's the difference between Das? What are the two mitzvahs, Emunah and Das? Va'inyan ki be'emes, the truth is, says the Alter Rebbe, zeh sha'olam kaidem b'shem Emunah. What the world calls amuna, faith, what is that? Lahamin, to believe, to accept, to believe. Mashakadosh Baruch Hu mechayes kulam. Like we say in davening, Veyadata mechayes kulam, that Hashem gives life to all. He sustains, He vivifies, He animates, He gives vitality, chiyus, chayes, to all. V'hu boras kol olam es me'ayin liyesh, and that He, Hashem, created all of the worlds. Me'ayin, from naught, from nothingness, liyesh, into somethingness. He created all the worlds. Ex nihilo, it's the Latin word me'ayin liyesh, from nothing to something. So this is what the world calls amuna. You have amuna. Person has amuna. What's amuna? He says two things. He gives life to everything and He created everything. Toyim, this is really a mistake. The word amuna is really not necessary for this. Why? Because this is something that is felt in a way that a person could intuitively, or at least on some level of degree, with intellect, see it, perceive it as a reality. What do you mean? True, you can't see it with the eyes of flesh, like you see something physical. Hashem is not a reality that is perceptible through Einei Basa. That's true. So why do you say Nirgish B'chinas Re'iyah? He says Harei Kilu Raya. But in terms of the certainty of it, it's like someone sees something. Al Zen Neman, this is the Pasuk says, Eov says, Job says, Umipsari echze elika. From my flesh, echze daika. The word echze means to see. Like chazoin yeshayo, right? A chazoin, chizayon is a vision when you see something. La chazoy is benoyam Hashem, to see. So Eov says, "Umipsari, from my flesh, echze elika. I will perceive, I will see." He says echze daika. And what does he mean? V'hainu mipsari. He says from my flesh. What does it mean from my flesh? So he says, "Shekemoi bipsari," just like when it comes to my flesh. You'll ask a person, do you have consciousness inside of you? Do you have a life force inside of you? Did you ever see consciousness? Nobody ever saw consciousness. Did you ever see a soul? Nobody ever saw a soul. Did you ever see a life force inside of you? You never saw a life force inside of you. But you know that you're alive, however you define it. Just like when it comes to my own flesh, my own body. You see the symptoms. You see that your body is alive. Baruch Hashem, your body is alive, and it exists. He knows that a person is not just a corpse that happens to be moving. I don't know, some... He knows, or Margish feels, in our very intuition, in our very sense, that the soul, however he defines the soul, nafshay, there's a life force, there's a consciousness that is inside of him, and that is what is mechaya, what is giving vitality, what is vivifying, animating, giving chiyus to the guf. Ubiladam, without the nefesh, ein chiyus v'kiyum l'guf. The body won't have life and existence. So Eov says, "Mipsari echzelika." That's the taich mipsari. Just like when it comes to my flesh, I don't see my soul, but still I see my soul. What does it mean I see my soul? I see the results, I see the consequences. The body I do see, and I know that it's alive. So that way, kach echzelika, the same is how I perceive, I see Hashem. So essentially, if you look at the universe, you're just looking at a large body. And the more you study the body, it's not that the less you think you need a soul. The more you see how intricate, but even without studying it, just the knowledge that a person is alive, but the more one studies it and sees what it takes to give chiyus to the body, what it takes to body to exist, First of all, to create the body, the whole system of how it's created, and the whole functionality of it. It just gives you much more sophistication or depth in how grand this consciousness is, this soul is. So Alter Rebbe says, if you study the world is essentially a guf gadol. It's a large organism. Just like a guf, all the parts have to work together to create functionality. It's not this different parts that shoot in different directions. It's impossible to live that way. And then you have the central nervous system, the control house, where all the directions are given out from, the brain. And that monitors every single detail. The olam is a guf gadol. The anatomy of the guf is an individual organism. In science, there's something called a superorganism. For example, when they'll have a colony of ants, so you'll have 10 million ants or 20 million ants, but they all work together. Ants are very good in working together because no ant could do anything on its own, right? Ants know that. We think we could do things on our own. The ants know one ant could do nothing, but 10 million ants could do a lot. It's incredible how that works. Incredible. Yeah, and everyone has a different job. Everyone, and based on its body weight, and its chemistry. Every ant has its own job, and together the colony survives and functions quite well. Listen, they're around thousands of years later, even though they are good food for quite a lot of other mammals or insects or reptiles. So in science they call it. How do they figure this out? I mean, they don't sit with meetings and computer programs, to figure out and delegate. They call it a superorganism. Superorganism means just like, how does my hand know what my foot needs? And everything is connected. So a superorganism means you have two ants. They don't have the same brain, but it's like a guf gadol. So he says essentially the whole world is that way. The ecosystem, just even in our planet, if you look at our planet, the ecosystem is so delicate and it's so intricate. Everything is part of a system of give and take that needs the other in order to survive. And it's functioning with a perfect unity. So just from one leaf, if you study one leaf, you could see how much engineering ingenuity there is literally in the existence of one leaf. That's one part of it. But then when you see the whole guf, so he says, mipsari, the way, that's mipsari echza lekan, not just from my flesh I perceive God. The way my flesh perceives the soul, it's in a way of echza, that's how echza lekan. You see the world shem k'may guf gadol. It's like a super large organism called a guf. It's a huge body. Both this planet, but also all the olamis, all the aspects of our planet and all the aspects of the universe, even beyond our planet. Like Chazal expressed themselves in Chagiga. From the earth to the heaven is 500 years. In other words, there's a connection. It's all one guf. The same is true even spiritual realities. Angels, souls, they too are like a body relative to the divine energy of the Ein Sof, of the Infinite One. Blessed be He who creates them and gives them life and gives them existence. On this, the Navi Yeshaya says, lift up your eyes, maraim, upwards, and look, who created all of this. So here again he uses the word uru'u mi bara ela. And therefore, when a person really internalizes this knowledge, it can become so real, as though I'm seeing something. What do they say? Seeing is believing. I see it. You can question, you can ask questions of something that I see, but I see it, it's a real thing. So this type of yediyah is it could be so visceral because the physical is visceral. And from the body, he perceives that there's something inside of it. And therefore, the more you look at the world, the more you study the world, the more you perceive the world, the more the person, intuitively and intellectually, with all of the person's senses and the person's mind, realizes that yesh balabayis lebidazu. This world is not just a random mutation that happened by accident, but rather there's Hashem who created the world and gives life to the world. And that's why the whole guf can exist. And the whole guf can exist in perfect synchronicity with all of its parts, and to continue to exist and continue to live and function the way it functions. Each part on its own, and its combination with all else. V'zeu loshen echza. And that's what Eev means when he says echza, I will see. He doesn't mean I'll see with elaka with my eyes. Elaka is not something you can see with your eyes. There's even physical things that we can't see with our eyes. In order to see something with your eyes, it has to be a certain type of reality that what we call the retina, the septors in my eye can perceive it, and my brain can interpret it, and then I can see something. The fact that you can't see something doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Usually that which is more important to existence we don't see.
Seeing is actually das.
Yeah. So that's what he's calling here das. Das is a form of seeing. Einei ha'eda, the eyes of the community. Doesn't mean physical eyes, but it means they have real perception. Perception that is real, is visceral. It's visceral. Just like something is visceral, meaning it's physical, it's somatic. I don't question it. So that's what real das means. It's internalized, it's integrated in a very authentic way. V'zeu loshen echza. V'lechein ein ze nikre b'shem amuna b'loshen hakodesh ela b'shem das. And that's why in real Lashon Kodesh, if you really want to be accurate about the word, that's not what Emunah is. When you spoke about faith, it's not what Emunah is. This is called das. You'll say you have a lot of people who don't have it. That's why you call it Emunah. So that's a shema mushal. It's a borrowed term. We call it Emunah because since you have to work on it. It's not like this. It's not like a table. That's true. But he says, but really it's not an inyan of Emunah. It's an inyan of das. It's called das. Ki das ulashon hakara v'hargasha. What das means is recognizing and feeling, experiencing. When something is recognized truly and experienced, hargasha, it's felt, meaning that its reality is experienced by the person as something real, that's what's called das. V'gam das hu hamakas halev shelo yasich ta'itimiza. Das also includes something else. And that is that you immerse yourself in it without hesech hadas. You say, what's a hesech hadas? Your das is removed. You could know that it exists, but it's abstract, it's irrelevant. It's like data. The information exists. You're not denying it, but that's not das. Das means this hamakas alev shelo yasich ta'iti. It says when you're wearing tefillin, you should have hesech hadas. What's hesech hadas? Doesn't mean you won't know that there's tefillin, but hesech hadas means you should be attentive. There could be a reality, but I'm not attentive to it. It exists somewhere, fine, it exists. There's no relevance to me. Das is attentiveness, like we say in Parshas Bereshis. The first time das is used, well, not the first time, we have Eitz das, but you have Adam Yoda es Chava. Adam knew Chava, and right after that it says, and she had two children. She had Cain and she had Hevel. Now, how from knowing Chava does she have children? Obviously, Yoda here is a euphemism for intimacy. Yoda doesn't mean he knew her, that he got her resume, and he told the Shadchan, I like her qualities. I'm just not sure about the seminary where she graduated from. Yoda doesn't mean Adam knew her as an intellectual concept. Chava is an interesting person. Adam Yoda es Chava means Adam connected to Chava. So das, it says in Tanya, das is lashon hiskashrus v'hischabros. It's a form of intimacy. Here we're not talking about physical, but the concept of das is intimacy. What's intimacy? Attentiveness. You're connected to it. You're inside. You're in it. You're bepnimius in it. You're not just observing it as something else. It's in front of the person's eyes that he remember it, not to forget it. It's an expression of Chazal. Hirur ba'alma means just thoughts, floating thoughts. Loi avid midday doesn't accomplish anything. Chazal say hirur lav kedibur dami. Thoughts are not like speaking. His point is, there could be a thought that's called hirur. That's not das. It's a fleeting thought. Das means I'm connected to it. There's an intimate connection with it because it's really integrated. It's real, and therefore it affects me.
So we actually have to know the universe.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you don't know, you're not interested in it.
Yeah. So the word amuna, the reason it's called amuna is because since poil, it's not something, God is not something you could see with your eyes. So therefore, they call it amuna. But Alter Rebbe says, really, if you think about it, the word amuna doesn't apply here. Amuna means faith. Amuna means belief. Emunah means trust. So even though that's what the world calls the existence of God as an inyan of amuna, but as he puts it here, he says it's a toyamem, it's a mistake. Ain't tzarich lezeh amuna. You don't need amuna. And if I'm using amuna for what I don't need amuna, it's a form of intellectual laziness. What, you don't need amuna? It's a form of, it's not what amuna is. This is what das is. So yeah, das doesn't mean I have to open my eyes. Just like if I close my eyes, I'm not going to see. So das is a form of opening the eyes of your mind. I could close my eyes. Somebody once wrote a book, The Closing of the American Mind. Professor Alan Bloom from University of Chicago. He claimed that all the universities in America in the 1980s, they learned how to teach students how to close their mind instead of open their mind. Just like seeing. You have to open your eyes to see. MS. If my eyes stay closed, I'm not going to see. And if I plug my ears, I'm not going to hear. So das is a form of seeing. It just depends what type of eyes, but you have to open your mind. But if you open your mind, you're truly, truly open to truth. You're truly open to inquisitiveness and curiosity, without bias, without agendas. He said it's not going to be amuna, it's going to be mipsari echze leka. You'll study one cell and you'll know that there's a creator to the world. You'll study one system of DNA in one body, in one cell from the 70 trillion cells, and you'll know that there's a creator. But you have to open your eyes, that's emes. So just because I have to work on something doesn't mean it's not seeing. But it's seeing. Physically you have to open your eyes, and mentally there's something called opening your eyes. I have to truly open my eyes to something. But he says this is das, it's not emunah. Mipsari echze leka. And this is the mitzvah to know. So when David HaMelech says, Das Elokei Avicha, this is what he's referring to. I want you to know. I want you to get it. I want you to get it like you see something visceral. That's how it should be by you. And as he's going to talk about Veyadata Hayah, the Rambam begins his entire halachic work, Mishnah Torah, which is considered the fundamental halachic work of all Jewish history, the seminal halachic work. Everything is based on the Rambam. Later you have the Torah, you have the Shulchan Aruch, but the Rambam was the first one to codify halacha in a system, and it was a work of extraordinary brilliance, precision, creativity, structure, organization. Ein goimrin as a hallel on the Rambam's Yad HaChazaka. So the way he begins Yad HaChazaka, this is the Mishnah Torah Sefer. It's divided in 14 svarim. So Sefer Hamada begins. The first sefer is called Sefer Hamada, which means the book of knowledge. And he says it concludes the things that a Jew needs to know. So the opening of Yad HaChazaka, Hilchus Yisodei HaTorah, Perek Aleph, Halacha Aleph is Yisod HaYisodes V'Amud HaChachmas, the pillar of all, the foundation of all foundations, and the pillar of all wisdoms. Leida, to know, Sheyesha Matzur Rishon V'Hu Mamtzi Chol Nimtza V'Chol HaNimtzayim Mishamayim V'Aretz U'Masha Beinayim Loi Nimtzu Ela Me'amitas Imatzah V'Im Yala Ladas Shehu Einay Matzu Ein Davar Achi Achil Imatzas. That's halacha beis. The Rambam says basically the foundation of foundations, the pillar of all wisdoms, is to know that there is a Matzur Rishon. Matzur Rishon means a primary first existence, and he brings into existence every single existence. And all existence from heaven till earth and everything in between did not emerge, did not come into existence only from the truth of his existence. And if you'll entertain in your mind that he doesn't exist, nothing else can exist. And he continues elaborating on this, and he finishes in Allah Chavav, V'yediyas davar zeh mitzvah saseh. And knowing this is a mitzvah shenemer anochi Hashem Elokech. That's the mitzvah of das. In Sefer HaMitzvahs of the Rambam is a short encyclopedic work of the 630 mitzvahs. That's like a very short version, just a brief mitzvah. Sefer HaMitzvahs. Over there, the first mitzvah is lahamen, the mitzvah to believe. In Yad HaChazaka, it's leida. Of was fragst du? Interesting question. You're saying Maimed Har Sinai. If Maimed Har Sinai is amuna or das, right? According to this, it's also an inyan of das, right? Atarei Saladas for sure for the people who stood at Maimed Har Sinai. But he's saying, according to the idea of the Yamin Rabbi Yehuda Halevi, the Kuzari, and the Rambam, passed down from generation to generation, so that's already an inyan of das. That's an inyan of das. Base. Achine. So what's the concept of amuna then? When we do speak about amuna, what is amuna?
Pushing the envelope of das.
Okay.
Pushing the envelope of das. So the das is limited. No?
Okay, obviously in das itself there's levels, but their point is
It's not only limited, it's in a way to complete das is impossible. Right? There will be something always that
yeah. So that's what he's going to discuss. That's what he's going to discuss now. Achine das vargosh zu b'chinas mamala kalalman. It's not that there's no concept of amuna. There is amuna. There's a mitzvah of amuna. It says vayaminu basha. You just said the whole concept of amuna is a mistake. You don't need amuna. Don't call it faith. You know, people call faith blind faith. That's what he's attacking here. Don't call it blind. I'm not blind. On the contrary, I see. It became like a concept. If you think that God exists, you're blind. I can't afford to be blind. I'm an intellectual. I have open eyes. The Rebbe is saying, Emunah doesn't mean to be blind. Emunah means not to be blind. It means to open your eyes. To really be open to everything, but including things that I may not be comfortable with. Das doesn't mean I make a condition. I once read a professor from Harvard, actually. He wrote an article. I have to commend his honesty. And he wrote, I read this somewhere a few years ago, he wrote, I have to be honest with myself that when we went into the research, we're researching biology and different things, biology, cosmology, we went in with the agenda to prove that you don't need God. But he was honest about it. He was honest. That was the agenda. The agenda was that we have enough science that we don't need God. And that's what it's popular to say today, that in the olden days, they thought the devils poison wells, and the devils are responsible for thunderstorms, and the devils are responsible for earthquakes, and for volcanoes, and for natural disasters, for tsunamis. So you had to believe that there's devils, so there's some gods and God. But now we have explanations for everything. We know why the volcano happened, and why the thunderstorm happened, and why the earthquake happened, and why the tsunami happened, and why there's lightning, and why there's thunder, and why there's coronavirus, as though we know why there's coronavirus, whatever, but whatever, we know everything. We know about bacteria, we know infections, we know electrons, we know diseases, we know germs. But the truth is, it's just the opposite. The more science that I once told you, the Rambam writes, it says in Ashrei, Dur l'dur yishabach masacha. So literally it means, from generation to generation, they praise your work. Yishabach. The Rambam says, the word Yishabach in Tanakh and also in Gemara often means when things grow. Like Uman koine b'shevach keli. Or Shabeach esakarka, you take somebody's earth and you meshabeach, it means you invest money and it becomes more expensive. It's not just praiseworthy, praise means the price goes up. It becomes more, when you appraise it, it's a much higher price now. That's what shevach means. So he says, Dur l'dur yishabach ma'asecha. In every generation, yishabach ma'asecha, they get to see much more of Masacha. In other words, as science and physics and cosmology and astronomy and all the chachmas, all the wisdoms of the world, neuroscience develops, what you only see is that the intricacy and the complexity of reality is so infinitely profound that it only demonstrates more the koyach habayra, the power of the Creator. They used to think, for example, that a cell was more or less a simple structure. So now the question is, what random forces had to come together in order to create a cell? Today, to think so about a cell is pretty ludicrous, because the infrastructure, the complexity, the nuances, and the chemistry of one single cell is so complex. As I once saw a scientist wrote, it's more complex than the infrastructure. You want to finish the sentence?
New York City.
Wow. Who wrote this?
I told you, it was someone, it was
Yeah.
a Rav, and he went through all literature. He said all the intellectual.
Yes, it's incredible. The creation of that first cell, to believe that that happened randomly, is beyond ludicrous. In terms of statistics, I mean, for that you have to have amuna. That's called amuna. Today you can add to the maimah like this. Belief in God is not called amuna, it's called das. Atheism, that's called amuna. The biggest believers are the atheists today. They believe. They know how to really close down their minds, close their eyes, and say, I believe be'emun, ani mamin be'emuna shleima, that there's no God. Va'afal pisha yismameya. All the signs can disprove me. Every day I'll see more and more insane proofs that this world has an existence, but this is emunah shleima. It's unwavering faith. So you can add to the maimah.
Richard Dawkins points out when he says the reproductive cell, when it appeared on the surface, and here it was. Why and what? There is no explanation.
That's Richard Dawkins.
Yeah.
And here it was. And here the cell suddenly was. So the infrastructure of a single cell is more complex than the infrastructure of New York City and London and Melbourne and Moscow put together. And you could probably add another few cities like Los Angeles and Paris. And you're talking about one cell. We have in our body, just in my body, I have between 50 and 70 trillion cells. That's one body of one person. Now take every tree and every shrub and every bush and every insect and every reptile and every mammal and every fish and every bird, etc., 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 etc. And that's the infrastructure you're talking about of one cell and how it then replicates. Even if you study what happens of how a baby develops, how the body comes to be what the body is. We take all these things for granted. That's what he says. Eev said, I'm just not taking it for granted. That's all I'm doing. I'm just opening my eyes. Stop taking it for granted. Don't take your nose for granted, that your nose is here and it's not on your knee. The nose could have also developed on my knee. The eyes could have been on my back too. We take these things for granted as though, sure, why not? And even a cherry grows on a tree, you take it for granted. You put a seed into the soil and somehow the soil, has studied science and geology for like 900 years. It knows exactly what to do with the seed. How to take it apart, and it becomes and different fruits and different vegetables, and even with the right taste, and it's pung the right nutrients to be able to keep everyone alive, all living organisms alive. And you can go on and on. You could talk about this for thousands and thousands of years, and you still won't finish. That's what he's saying. So Eov is saying, you need das for this. You need to open your eyes. That's the union of das. Even though he says people call it amuna, that's not really what amuna is. It's not. You don't need amuna for this. On the contrary, by calling it amuna, you're making it as though it's something that requires this quantum. They call it a quantum leap, a leap of faith. What does a leap of faith mean? You're taking a leap. What are you jumping over? You're jumping over rationality. Because I'm a rational person, I can't jump over rationality. You could take leaps. You can jump over leaps of faith. You can have blind faith. You know how to close your eyes. But I can't close my eyes. I'm an open person. So that's what he's saying. It's the other way around. Das doesn't mean closing your eyes. Das means opening your eyes. Mipsari echza. Sur marimenechem uru'u mibarele. Yeshaya Navi didn't ask people to close their eyes. He asked them to open their eyes. Effen in the Eigen. Das alekei avicha. You say this later, she'ashamatzirish. That's the first nikud in the Maimer. Achine das var gashazui bebchines mamala kalalman. This das and argasha, this relates to what we call mamala kalalman. What does mamala kalalman mean? Like he says in many Maimonim. The expression mamala kalalman comes from the Zohar, but the idea of what mamala kalalman, the Alter Rebbe says in many Maimonim, means the divine energy that fills the worlds. Mamale from the word mole. What's the concept of mamala kalalman? It's the divine energy that serves as the consciousness of every single being in the world. It's the source of creation and existence and vitality of every point and every creature and every creation in the world. Over there's das v'hargasha. just like the body. I know my body is alive. I know I have consciousness. I know that I'm alive. You could sit and tell me that I'm crazy. I'm not really alive. It's an illusion. Fine, maybe we're all having the same illusion. But with it, if we want to take our senses serious, you could say the mind doesn't exist, your senses don't exist, that itself is a dream. But that dream itself is some form of existence.
It's all a mathematical equation.
Right. So the guf knows that I know that I have a life force, I have a consciousness, I have a nefesh. From what? From the functionality of the body. So when you look at the world is a guf gadol. So the das and argashes and the divinity, which is called mamala kalam, it fills the world just like the neshama fills the body. The Gemara says in Brachas, Barchi nafshi es Hashem, ma haguf, ma kadosh baruch hu mamali esoila, ma fa neshama mamali es haguf. The soul filling the body like Hashem filling the world. V'lechei nikri b'chinas mamala kalam b'shem alma d'izgalia. That's why generally in Chassidus and Kabbalah, Mamala Kalalman is called Alma D'Izgalia, the revealed world. What does it mean, the revealed world? Alma D'Izgalia from the word Gilui, because Mamala Kalalman is the way the Ein Sof is manifested viscerally in the universe, in the body, just like the soul. It's revealed in the body. I can't see my soul, not because it doesn't exist, because it's not a type of existence that my physical eyes can perceive. I also can't see my cells. I never saw my cell. Forget about soul. Even cell I didn't see. I also never saw an atom. Nobody's going to say atoms don't exist because you don't see. The fact is, we know today, it's an interesting thing, that the deeper things are and the more intrinsic they are to reality, the less you see them. The most important things that govern our world, you don't see. Nuclear energy, nobody sees. Atoms, nobody sees. Cells, nobody sees. Cells are pretty important. Genes, pretty important, nobody sees. Electricity, electrons, we don't see. Yeah, germs, we don't see. For thousands of years, they didn't know about it. Bacteria, fungi, fungus, nobody sees. Infections, all these things. It's not that we don't see it because they don't exist. On the contrary, usually what we see, its existence is far less important than what we don't see. Because what I see is that which my eyes are a keli for. I have the receptors to be able to see it and interpret it. So when you talk about does what I see exist, what I don't see physically, if that doesn't exist, then most of the world doesn't exist. What we see is a very limited form of existence, and even that part that we see is only a limited aspect of it. So when you talk about Alma D'Izgalia, here we're talking about something that's revealed and manifested, even if I can't see it physically, but it's manifested. That's talking about Mamala Kalam. Mamala Kalam is the way the Ein Sof is the engine of the universe, and the engine of the universe you can perceive. You can perceive. You don't need and we don't need such brilliant das for this. If I walked into a factory and I saw that there were 10,000 machines and each machine was functioning and all the machines were functioning together because each one was another part of the company doing another job in order to produce whatever the material that I want to produce. So it goes from one machine to another machine to another machine to another machine until the final product. It doesn't take brilliance to know that there's somebody behind this company. If somebody says there's an engineer who built each machine on its own, and then there's somebody who figured out how all the machines should be working together and synchronizing together, and there's an owner here who's in charge of everything, a manager who's in charge of everything. Well, you never saw him, you never saw an engineer. No, there's only a machine. Everybody understands it's insanity. Huh? That's amuna, you see. That would be an amuna, yeah. That would take amuna. And you'll say, so why is he not here? So if there's somebody in charge, why is he not here? That only shows you how brilliant he is. It shows you that he's more brilliant. The fact that he doesn't even have to be there. Right? That he doesn't have to be there. Somebody's sitting at his home. He doesn't even have to sit with a joystick in this place. He could sit with a joystick somewhere else. He doesn't have to sit b'chlal. It only shows you, on the contrary, it shows you how brilliant the system is. It's so brilliant that you don't even have to see him here. So everybody understands when it comes to a factory, it shows how great the engineer is, or how great or successful the manager is. When it comes to the world, it's pshita that way. It's even more. You're not talking about 10,000 machines. You're talking about 10,000 machines in one cell. You're not even talking about 1 million machines. You're not even talking about 1 billion machines. You're not even talking about numbers that we can talk about. We can't even talk about the numbers. Everything is functioning on its own and with perfect synchronization, because if not, nothing would exist. So that's all Mamala Kalalman. The way the Ein Sof is manifested, it fills the worlds, and therefore it becomes the chemistry and the engineering and the engine and the consciousness and the life force of everything in the world, and everything in its own way. That's Das. Something we call Sof of Kalalman. Ksiv, your favorite words, Ani Hashem lo shanisi. On this, the pasuk says in Malachi, the Navi Malachi says, Ani Hashem lo shanisi, Ani Havaya. Havaya is Yutke Vovke. I have not changed. What's pshat? It says, Va'atu kaidum shenivra ilam. We say in davening in the morning, right after Kriya Shema Shal the Krishma Ktana in Karbonos. Atu at shaloi nivra ilam, Atu achash nivra ilam. Some Sidurim is Atu kaidum shenivra ilam. So literally it means, you were there before the world was created, you were there after the world was created. But the most Neschai, the word is Atohu. You're the same one pre and post. It's not you were there before, you're there now. It's like you're the eternal spectator. It's like the White House secretary, lives through all the presidents. You were there before you. You're the same who, the Zelba who, the same who pre-creation as post-creation. That's what Lo Shanisi means. The way the Alter Rebbe teaches this, one of the Yesodis of Chassidus is, maybe the Yesod, that the reality of pre-creation is still there post-creation. When you say you didn't change, it means you're echad, you're everything, you're infinite. Infinity has not changed. That means the world post-creation is still the same reality like pre-creation. You say, what do you mean? Yes, shouldn't you see there's a whole universe? Pshat is she'enei begeded alman klal. Mamalik al-alman is a pshat, he is begeded alman. He's in the realm of the world. He becomes the engine of the world. If you say he's not begeded alman, then he can't give chiyus to the world. My soul has to be begeder of my guf. It has to tailor-make itself to my body. The ant has to have a brain that works for the ant, that monitors and is in charge. It's a central nervous system for the ant. Just like the monkey needs to have his brain, the human his brain, and the elephant its brain. Mamalik al-alman means it's the way the Ein Sof is begeded alman. It comes into the geder, to the parameters. It needs parameters. If there's no parameters, how could there be a cup without parameters? Every creation has its parameters, its gedorim, its realms. That's what diversity is. That's why you are you and I am I. And an ant is an ant, and a grain of sand is a grain of sand, and a black hole is a black hole, and a star is a star, and Mars is Mars, and Venus is Venus, and Earth is Earth.
And the universe is universe. It's limited.
And there's a limited universe. So if the Ein Sof is not begeder alman, so you just have Ein Sof. That's Mamalaklam. What's Sof of Kalam? Sof of Kalam means that he's not begeder alman. He's not in the realm of the world. It's Ein Sof. And that Nekud of Ein Sof is Kodim Shenivra Olam, and it's also Lacha Shenivra Olam. That's Ani Hashem Lo Shanisi. There's no change post-creation. This is where Emunah comes in.
That's where science don't understand
Yeah.
singularity.
Yeah, that's where science stops.
We cannot figure it out.
The very tools that science uses in order to figure out reality is part of the reality that is already post filters and restrictions and concealments and so forth. Remember, the instruments we use to determine reality will always define the reality that we're going to determine. Yeah, one of the mistakes people make is they use limited instruments to figure out reality, and then they say this is the reality. Maybe you have to look at the instruments you're using. Ein chavosh matir atzmei beis hasurim. The Gemara says a prisoner can't take themselves out of prison. Why not? Because I have the shackles. You want that I, which is in shackles and chains, should take myself out. My brother told me that somebody once came to get some advice. He told him something. He So he didn't accept it. So he says, maybe you have a blind spot. Is that possible? He says, I don't agree. He says, but every person has blind spots. This is a person, you have blind spots. He says, it's true, I have blind spots, but I know them. I have blind spots, but I know them. My father was sick, so my mother felt that the doctor, my mother's lying here for the doctor wasn't doing a good job. So nicely, she once tells the doctor, maybe we can get a second opinion. So the doctor says, it's a good idea, but I'll tell you when you need a second opinion. Until I tell you don't need a second opinion, you don't need a second opinion. There's the humility that comes with the fact that the instruments I'm using to define who I am may be part of the problem, not part of the solution. It's like I'm using my mind to figure out my mind. Maybe that's the problem. I can't use my mind to figure out my mind because the mind that I'm trying to figure myself out with is contaminated, is toxic. Right? That's why we sometimes go in this vicious cycle of healing and self-discovery. Who is the self that's going to discover the self? Who? The self that needs the most help. In other words, the very instruments, the very kalim I'm using to figure things out, those kalim themselves are part of the problem, not part of the solution. Or at least part of the limitation, even not part of the limitation. So he says, when you talk about soiviv, that's what the word soiviv means. Soiviv doesn't mean he's around, soiviv means around, like saviv, right? Svivon is a dreidel. He doesn't mean soiviv. They had around the mizbeach called a soiviv. It went around the kohenim like a ledge. The kohenim could walk around. Soiviv doesn't mean he's around the world, like you're making a kafas. Soiviv means he's not in the realm of the world. Einay begeder, that's the word soiviv. It's a very important term. Mamale fills. Soiviv also fills, but mamale means it's begeder. You fill it in a way where you define yourself in the parameters, in the realm, in the geder. Geder means a fence. The word geder literally means ligdar geder, to make a fence. That's what the word geder, a realm, right? Good neighbors, good fences, good neighbors make. There's a geder. A geder means a definition. Every fence is a definition. What does a fence mean? A fence is, my house ends here and your house, property begins afterwards. Intellectually also. You say a geder, a hagdara. The word hagdara means definition. Hagdara, la hagdir. When you define something, you know, it's a tissue box, it's not a table. Everything needs a definition. Right? In Seichel, it's very important. Ideas, define the idea, be it magdir. So that's what begeder alman means. It's in the geder of oilam. And everything has a different geder. Soiviv, he says, is not begeder, alman klal. Rak p'chinas malchus chalavade, he malchus kaloi lamim. That's the pshat in the pasuk malchus kaloi lamim. Literally, it means your malchus rules all the world. You have the king of Denmark, his malchus extends in Denmark. You have the king of England, malchus extends in the United Kingdom. Malchus kaloi lamim. The Alter Rebbe teaches it in a deeper way. He says, Rak p'chinas malchus chalevad hi malchus kaloi lamim. It's only the p'china of malchus, of your malchus, that's the malchus that extends in all the worlds. Dainu p'china ziv ha'aram emidas malchusi yisbarach. Mala kalalman is what's called a ziv, a ray. Ziv is like a ray. A ha'ara, a glimmer from the midah of malchus. Kemaimer, baruch shem kveid malchusi le'elam vad. Shem kveid malchusi v'lei malchusi. It's not even malchus itself, it's a ray of malchus. So Mamala Kalaman would be just like the ray of a sun, the sun. It comes from the sun, but you can't capture the entire sun by the ray. The ray is one limited reflection and glimmer that comes from the extraordinary, powerful ball of fire we call the sun. And this is what could come into the window and give me warmth and give me light and even give me some vitamin D.
You can see.
And you could see through that. That's what oir is, light. So malchuscha, the whole kolei lamim, all the worlds which lives from you, that's all your malchus. It's the p'china of malchus, the midah of Hashem, who wanted to be a melech. From that midah comes the light that vitalizes and gives chiyus. That's what it is. Baruch shem kvoid malchusa goes into l'olam vod. On this, the Chazal say it's in Pirkei Rebbe Lezer, Ad shlei nivra olam hayahu shmei belvad. Pre-creation of the world was he and his name alone. Shagam Shmoi, he b'nis malchusi b'chinas lavada. Before creation was he and his name. What's his name? Before creation was him. Hayohu bilvat. No. The Chachamim say, Hayohu, it's picked the Rebbe Lezer, from the Rebbe Lezer HaGadol. So you're talking about pre-Mishnah. The Rebbe Lezer HaGadol was the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva. So there's a medrash called Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. So over there he says, before the world was created, Hayohu Shmai Bilvat. Very interesting expression. Was he and his name alone. He and his name. What was his name? What do you need a name before you created the world? A name you need for other people. The pshat is, the Alter Rebbe says that before creation there was also Shmai. There was also Mamala Kalalman. But it was Bilvat. Shmai represents that, you say your name, your reputation, the way you're known to others. For yourself, you don't need a name. You need a name for others to call you, and when we say somebody's name, what does it mean? It's the way they're known to others, their reputation, name in terms of reputation. Spiritually, in a more abstract way, who represents the Ein Sof? Shmai represents the Ein Sof the way it could be known to others. How can it be known? That's Mamala Kalaman, the way it becomes filtered and restricted. Pre-creation, you also had that, but it was Bilvad. There was Hu Shmai Bilvad. There was only him and Shmai. So he says, even Midas Malchusay, Shagam Shmai Midas Malchusay, he b'bchinas Levadai. Or Kamashakasav of Kinizgav Shmai Levadai, Rakhoide V'zivay Shashmai Aletz V'Shamai. So the way Mamala Kalaman existed before was, it was only Bilvad, because it was inside of, it was Kavayachol, subsumed in the Ein Sof. It would be like the ray of the sun inside the sun.
So basically he's talking to himself? What is it?
So it's the potentiality. Everything that exists in creation existed pre. The chiddush of creation was not creation. The chiddush of creation is the perception that there's something called creation. That Mamala Kalalman gets separated from Sof of Kalalman, and now it could be defined as a defined reality. Before that, the ray of the sun is in the sun.
Creation is real. It's as real as we can get.
Yeah, Mitzad Mamala creation is very real. That's what it is. It's like the ray of Shmai coming out, and now it could become a self-contained reality. That's what it says. Yehalalu Hashem Hashem. We say in the morning from Tillim, Kinizgav Shmai Levadai, Hoide Alaretz V'Shamayim. So the way everyone teaches it is, praise the name of God, because His name is exalted above alone. His ray is Eretz V'Shamayim. He says, no. Yehalalu Hashem Hashem, Ki Shmai Nizgav. Even Shmai is Levadai. The Hoide is a ray of Shmai. That's what comes into Eretz V'Shamayim. Rak Hoide V'Zivir Shel Shmai Eretz V'Shamayim. V'nikru Hu Yizbarach B'Shem Sof of Kalalman. This is called Sovev. She'eina olam is teifsim makim negder. Here, the olamas don't occupy space, because they're completely subsumed in the infinity. She'chiyus sayam espasha teicha olamas eina kedimin anesama mislabeshes mamish teicha guf. The energy that comes into all the worlds is not like the soul in the body. It gets affected from the events of the body, it gets affected from time, it gets affected from space, it gets affected from cold, from heat. Even though he's here, just like he's there, he's below, just like he's above, no difference. He doesn't become defined and grasped in the realm of space, or in the highest and the lowest are the same. Sof of Kalalman doesn't mean that he's above the worlds. No. He's everywhere. He's in the worlds also. But still remains Sof of Kalalman. Even inside the worlds it remains Sof of Kalalman. Sof of Kalalman doesn't mean it's abstracted somewhere else. That's what we say in Yishtabach. V'hakadosh b'shamayim uvaretz. Yishtabach shim chalad malkeinu akel hamelech hagadol. V'hakadosh b'shamayim uvaretz. Literally means he's holy in heaven and earth. What does that mean? It says shalafi sho kadosh muvdol. Since he's kadosh, what does kadosh mean? Kadosh means completely transcendent. Ubebchinas Sof of Kalalman lachenu shava mamish be'eretz mitachas k'may b'shamayim imal. Therefore, he's completely in the earth, just like he's in heaven. There's no distinction whatsoever. There's no lower and there's no higher. Nimtza lamata k'may lamal. There's no place or situation that's devoid of Sof of Kalalman, because Sof doesn't mean he's around it, he's not in it. It means the way he's in it is not in a way that's limited and defined by the realm of the world. It remains completely infinity. Hamelech hagadol hainu b'chinas mamala Kalalman. So yishtabach shim chalad malkeinu hakel HaMelech HaGadol, that's Soiv, that's Mamalek Kalalman. HaKadosh B'Shamayim V'Haaretz, that's Soiv Kalalman. HaMelech HaGadol is Malchus, is Pashtus Gdulas Malchusi is Baruch, the extension of his Malchus. And Malchus means that there's another one in order to rule. Ein Melech B'Lam, Kivul Gdulasi in Chayker Ksiv, Ksiv Elef Alafim Chuli. But Soiv Kalalman is Ein Begeded Alman, is not in the realm of words, Vein Elam is Pe'elim B'Shum Shinui Chas V'Shalom. None of the existence creates any change. Just like pre-creation is the same as post-creation. The same oneness of pre exists post. Here to say that there's das and hargasha, that I could see it and know it with my brain, with my senses, viscerally, like I know my soul. It says, you don't say that. The very realm of seichel and hasaga is post-creation. So you can't be teufus with a tool of mamale, that which is beyond it. You can't be teufus b'shum seichel v'asaga echein shini lefonu baruch elazui b'chinas emunah. This is emunah. Lahamin b'Hashem shehu yizbarach eini begeded almin v'lefonav kachashecha kaira. This is emunah, that Hashem is not in the realm of worlds and darkness is just like light. And that's the word of Kudas of kachashecha kaira. Like it says in Tehillim, Kuf Lametes, this is where it's from, Tehillim. Im esek shamayim shamata, if I go up, you're there. Vatzia shoel, if I go into the shoel, hineka, you're there. I go to the other side of the sea, you're there. And then I say there's so much darkness. He says, Gam choshech lo yachshech mimeka, v'layla kayom yoyer kachashecha kayra. Darkness and light are the same. What's this nikuda?
But when the Rebbe wants to, he says, I want you, only you. So
That's what he was looking for.
right, but it's beyond seichel.
It's beyond seichel.
So he wanted to connect to Soiv Kalam.
Yeah.
So not the.
It's not with seichel. Now you have another question. Where would this amuna come from? Why should I believe it? Why? So how do you know about it? I'm a Mali, I get. Study your cell, study your science, study your physics, I get it. Open your eyes. Look at the world with truth. But where are you getting this from? You came up with a whole nice theory about the non-existence. Okay, so that will get. But before we get to Nikud, in other words, Emunah also needs a justification. Just because you're calling it Emunah doesn't mean it's true. You know, not everything that people call kfira is kfira, and not everything people call Emunah is true. Could be Emunah's tfeilis, could be stupid. You're stupid for believing something, right? Or you're wise for believing it. That itself we have to. But first a little definition. Now, even though it's a joke to say a little definition on something that's not defined, but Fart, Alter Rebbe is teaching it, so he wants some form of, at least some relationship to it. But as we're going to see, it's not that there's no relationship to Seiviv. There's a very deep relationship to Seiviv. But the relationship is not called Das. Emunah doesn't mean you're an idiot. Emunah is a relationship. It's a relationship that requires different tools. That's what it is. There's tools of Das and there's tools of Emunah. Emunah is a tool. It's a tool at your disposal. It's the tool that allows experience, or at least connection, or some form of intimate relationship with that which Das is not a tool that can be used. It's a different tool at your, you have to have a toolbox. And different things in life need different tools. Sometimes the tool is Das, and sometimes the tool is Emunah. What's this inyan that he's describing here? At least one nakud of it. So he uses a lot of words. It's not like the soul that gets affected by the body. It's not affected by time. It's not affected by space. There's no difference of heaven and earth. It's in the lowest and the highest. Darkness is light. What are all these things pointing out to? Mamale kalalman means that there's differences. Everything is different. And therefore there's time and there's space. There's past. That's what mamale means. Huh? Yeah, you don't say everything is shava. Everything shamayim imal. It's not. That's why it's called heaven and earth. There's heaven and earth. Heaven and earth are descriptions of something. There's ruchni and there's gashmi. There's spiritual, there's physical. Just like the body. There's no difference in the body. No. The whole brilliance of consciousness and the life forces, when the blood circulates, it gives every cell what it needs. the type of blood that the brain needs is not the same type of blood that the leg needs. And it's unbelievable how they figure that out, but somehow they figure it all out. The heart knows exactly. You're getting this blood, you're getting that blood. Every system, there's different, it's all about differences. It's all about demarcations and gdarim. The whole nikud of mamala kalalman is it fills everything according to its capacity. So the way it fills me is not the way it fills you. The word soivev, you're saying it surrounds, it encompasses all the worlds. So everything is the same, not because it's not inside, it is inside. But the way it's inside is not like mamala. So what's the difference between the two? So on Soivev he says, it's just like after creation. What does that really mean? It means as follows. It's a little bit abstract. He says himself it's abstract, so. If infinity is infinity and infinity is undefined, creation did not change that. What creation changed was that there should be able to be a perception of the light, the ray of the sun leaving the sun. Imagine the ray of the sun, this Alter Rebbe is mashal in Tanya in many places, the ray of the sun inside the sun. What you would call the ray of the sun in the solar core. The ray of the sun in the solar core, it's stronger than it's outside. If the light of the sun is hot outside, imagine how hot it is inside. The intensity is much more, but it doesn't occupy space over there. It doesn't have its own name. It doesn't have its own identity. Not because it's not there. It's much more. If it can shine outside, it can shine inside also. But it's inside the sun. It's batal b'metzias. Batal b'metzias doesn't mean it's nullified because it's not there. It's nullified because it's part of the sun itself. It doesn't have its own identity outside of it. There's a word from the Alter Rebbe, I think B'Shem the Magid, it says, B'reishis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'saretz. In the beginning, God created es hashamayim v'saretz. So he teaches, what was creation? God created the letters, es, oisius hashamayim v'oisius saretz. The letters of heaven and the letters of earth. Not heaven and earth. Heaven and earth were there before. The chiddush of creation is letters of heaven, the letters of earth. The ability to call it heaven, the ability to call it earth. What does it mean, the ability to call it heaven, the ability to call it earth? The entire potentiality of Mamala Kalama to create all the worlds was inside of him before. That's what he says. Hayahu Shmoy Bilvad. Why is it negayah to know that Shmoy was also there before? Because that means that creation didn't change anything. Shmoy was there. But the way Shmoy was there, Shmoy, by the way, is the gematria of Ratzon. The desire was there. But the desire, which is the source of energy of the world, was all part of him. That didn't change from creation. After creation, it's still that oneness. It's still that Ein Sof. Everything is Ein Sof. So what did change? What changed was that there's an ability to perceive the ray of the sun the way it came out. And it has its own metzias to the point that it becomes Mamala Kalalman. And everything has its own gedder, its own identity. If the doors of perception were cleansed, nothing has oisius. Everything is subsumed in the core, in the essence. And therefore, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear as is, pure infinity, without any distinctions. And that, there's no difference between darkness and light. Every situation is directly Ein Sof. It's when we say perception here, perception doesn't mean it's a lie. Perception means from a particular perspective it's real, yeah. But it's from the perception of the way there was a tzimtzum, the way there was a concealment of the Ein Sof. And all we have access to is the ray, and now the ray becomes an identity. And here the Ein Sof has heaven, and there's earth, and there's differences. Like the soul comes into the body. Mitzat Soivev, pre-creation is Einoid Mulvadei. Post-creation is also Einoid Mulvadei. What do you mean Einoid Mulvadei? What about me? What about you? I'm a lie. How is he saying this maimer? How is the Alter Rebbe saying this maimer and saying it's the same like pre-creation? So why is Alter Rebbe saying a maimer? You should say, oh, I have proof that I'm not saying the truth. I'm saying a maimer. Isn't that a good question? A klotz kasha. Einoid mulvade, einoid mulvade, einoid mulvade. So why are you saying a maimer if einoid mulvade? Where are you? How do you have a mouth? Because that's immaturity. Immaturity, einoid mulvade, means nothing exists. No. Everything exists. It's still einoid mulvade. It doesn't mean I'm afraid of the world. It means the world is your mouth is also ein soif. I'm not afraid of your mouth. God is not afraid of your mouth, of your identity. Soiv doesn't mean he's there. And einoid mulvade is in heaven. It's in heaven, in the seventh heaven, after l'chaim, in the middle of Simchas Torah is einoid mulvade. That's not the pshat. Kachashecha kaida means your mouth too, your nose too, your job too, your money too, your marriage too, your house too. Kachashecha kaida. Even your struggles. Hayahu shmai bilvad means that shmai was also bilvad. Shmai is everything that we got to know. His name is the way God is revealed into a cup and into a mic and into a pen and into a key. What's this? Into AirPods. I know these are not natural creations, but it's all from creation. It's all mamalik alma. You understand? When he says Yesod Kalma, doesn't mean he's not here. This is the Yesod of everything. It means it's everything. Everything is also that. Kachashecha kaida. Hakadosh b'shamayim avodas. Don't say it's eretz. So you say, okay, so if it's here, so now I'm defined by it. I'm not defined by it. It is defined by me. In other words, nothing really has a definition in this space. Even darkness is pure Ein Sof. But there's also something called Mamalik Alaman. Mamalik Alaman is there was a tzimtzum. The tzimtzum is that the ray does leave the sun, at least from our perception. Not from his perception, it never left. But that's what the concealment means. And even in that is him. That's also him. So the Maimon we learned Shabbos, Likkutei Torah, what was it? Parshas Matas, yeah? Hecholzu. So that's the Nekuda. The Nekuda is all the letters Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, that's all Shmoi. Pre-creation there was Shmoi, but it was Hubu Shmoi Bilvad. The Shmoi was just a chelik of him. There was no Shmoi outside of him. The Chiddush of creation is that Shmoi is seen as a ray outside of the sun, and therefore it occupies identity, and it becomes the identity of the world. Let me talk about this in the person. It'll be a little easier to understand, because we'll soon see how it applies, but it's the same nekuda. What's mamali and soiviv in a person? Since nasa adam b'tzalmeinu kidmusenu, so we're in the image of Hashem, we have the same nekuda. You have parts of you. Jetzt sollst du sich zuhören. Jetzt darfst du dich zuhören. Jetzt. Hast dich zugehört früher euch, aber jetzt ist eine Gehe. We have parts of a person, every person, like he says here, the soul gets affected by life. You say, I don't get affected by life. Well, every soul gets affected by life. You're in the body, your marriage. It's like, my marriage partner doesn't affect me. Either you're dead, or you're completely sick. Huh? So this we have to understand. When I'm in a relationship, I get affected. That's what a relationship is. Yeah. So that's what he says about the neshama. You're in the guf and you become part of it. It's the experience of the guf. Mamala kalalman kivayachol, even though it's on a much higher level, but he compares it somewhat to the soul and the body. In a person's life, life's events affect me, and my identity develops based on that, changes, goes through vicissitudes, aliyahs, yuridis, ups and downs. That's the mamali in a person. We have a life force, and that life force can be seriously challenged, changed, hindered, affected. What's the nekuda of ani Hashem lo yisha nisi? Ani Hashem Loisha Nisi doesn't mean you're stoic. You're so stubborn you don't change. Ani Hashem Loisha Nisi, you can't change me, you can't affect me. I'm just a stubborn mule and I don't get changed by anything because I'm detached. That's not a chiddush of Loisha Nisi. Ani Hashem Loisha Nisi means I'm inside everything and Loisha Nisi. Why not? Not because you're stubborn, but because everything is one. In a person's life, it means we have those parts of ourselves that get very affected by life. Very affected. Our identity gets affected. And you could talk about this. What are the changes that happen in people as a result of their life's journeys? And heaven knows how many things happen. And we need to understand it. And over there could be das and hargosha, and you could see things. Even though if I can't see it with my eyes, but I see the symptoms. I see the symptoms. I have somebody I know very well. So he had a very difficult life, and then he had a miserable marriage for many years. And he went he jumped from therapist to therapist to therapist, I don't know, for a quarter century. 25 years, 30 years. Finally, he came to one therapist. I'm laughing, it sounds so funny, but the therapist says, listen, I'm looking at your life. You have all the symptoms of what you call developmental trauma. Something very serious happened to you. You have all the symptoms. The only thing we now need to find is the story. Now we just have to find the story. You have all the symptoms. There's insanity in your life. You have all the symptoms. Now we need the story. There's no story because he had a very normal life, l'chayra. Right? So you see symptoms. You know there's something there. I don't know what happened. I don't have nevuah. But you know there's a source. This is in a negative sense. But it brings out the idea. You see the results. You know there's a source. I don't know this source. I have to figure it out. But I could see the source. I don't see it, but I see the symptoms. Just like you see a guf, you see a neshama. But there's another nekuda in a person. That's the nekuda of Ani Hashem Loisha Nisi. There's a nekuda in a person where your Ein Sof wasn't compromised even a bit. Because even the darkness is also Ein Sof. Is also part of it. And that's why all real healing comes from Sovev Kalalman. And from the fusion of the two. As the Maimon will continue, what it means to fuse the two. So if you look in a person, there's a nekuda in the self. You say, well, what do you mean? I went through this, I went through this, I went through this, I went through... It's true. God went through all of this. And you say, why Kaidem Shenivra Olam? Because all interpretation of things as darkness is already an interpretation of Mamalik Kalam. It's an interpretation of Das. It's the instruments we use to define reality. This is pain, this is pleasure. This is good, this is bad. This is light, this is dark. This is incredible, this is sick. This is heaven, this is hell. Forgive my French. This is Shamayim, Meimal, this is Eretz Mitachas. And Sovev Kalalman, well, I don't know about this. I'm detached, I'm not detached. It's Atu, Kaidem Shenivra Elam, Atu Lacha Shenivra Elam. So b'meila, everything is part of infinity. So in that sense, in that space, if you could call it a space, there's no darkness. There's also no light. It's not that there's no darkness because you're detached. There's no darkness because the definitions are not there. And when the definitions are not there, so the same oneness that pervaded reality pre-creation is the same oneness that pervades reality post-creation. This experience is an inyan of amuna. It's not an inyan of das and hargasha. It's an inyan of amuna. It's a different tool to experience it. It's not the science of things. The science of things is the way they work in terms of definition, and you need that. You can't build a bridge, and you can't build an airplane, and you can't even you can't put together a pen if you don't have definitions. That's why Amalek Kalman is so important. The Nakud of Sovev Kalalman is that Nakuda in life where Ani Hashem lo shanisi. So Amela, everything is part of that lo shanisi. Everything. There's no nekuda in life where right now is not Ein Sof. And this connects to the whole machlokes of tzimtzum shaloi kipshutai or tzimtzum kipshutai. If tzimtzum kipshutai, it means there's a literal tzimtzum. If tzimtzum shaloi kipshutai, which was the whole foundation of the Baal Shem Tov and Alter Rebbe, the tzimtzum is shaloi kipshutai. So it means that mamala kalalman is also soiv kalalman. It's not two separate things. The question is simply levels of perception. So there's a level of perception that we understand. And even the perception of mamali, that's also soiv. Mitzat soiv, that's also soiv. There's no nekuda that's not. In this place of the person, there's no such a thing ever that you're a victim, that you were abused, that you're a carbon, that you're downtrodden. You say, what do you mean? Who are you talking to? You're talking to me. Yeah, the me that I know with my instruments of knowledge about me, I'm this and I'm that and I'm that. That's all interpretations that I gave to myself based on life experiences that I interpreted based on the limited knowledge of how I saw myself. And we understand that, and you have to respect that. You have to respect it. You can't delegitimize it. But simultaneously, we have to be able to also open ourselves up to a deeper vision of reality in which the oneness is eternal. It's the only reality. All other realities are inside of it. The only reality is soiviv. The question is, are there other realities? So the chiddush is that there's also other realities. The whole revolution of creation is, God said, you know what, we're going to give a perception of other realities so you can make a dira b'tachtainim. So it's not, is that a reality? All other realities are in that reality. That is reality. In that reality, you have so many other realities, and realities that we have to reckon with. We have to reckon with because that's that's part of Soiviv, that it came into Mamale too.
Perception of Soiviv, there's no tzimtzum or expansion. Question, this we can't know from the Torah. The Torah speaks about this. If I know the Torah as that, I don't need to use Emunah.
No, of course this comes from Torah, but in Torah itself, the experience of it is not.
Understand it?
Yeah. Ah? I didn't hear what? No, dira b'tachtoinim is only because of a malak al-alman. Mitzat soiviv, there's no tachtoinim. Dira b'tachtoinim means that our perception of reality and this world is extremely important, and that was the purpose of creation. Remember, there could have been kodim shenivram. It didn't have to have achar shenivram. Then you wouldn't need a mimer to tell you that it's now like before. Don't make a creation, and you won't have to give me a whole pshetel.